I try my cases in the courtroom, not the newsroom. And I think that oftentimes people will have opinions that are based on little tiny snippets that may not be put in complete context. And so when I give my perspective on the details of this case, it's not just based on reading one article or watching one 20-second news, clip. Mm-hmm. It's really reading articles from multiple sources, reading interviews from multiple individuals, with direct firsthand knowledge of the case, and kind of putting everything together so you have context, not just one little piece of information. What's good, people? I'm attorney John Mobley. I have prosecuted and litigated complex civil and criminal cases for over 30 years, and I'm still actively litigating these cases today. My experience was forged in the legal trenches, going toe-to-toe with some of the best lawyers in the country, and I'm still actively litigating these cases. On this podcast, I'll be giving no-holds-barred, hard-hitting legal analysis on the legal issues that are gripping the nation. But you want to hear more than just legalese or legal mumbo-jumbo. It's important to have the perspective of a non-lawyer. So my assistant Kayla is joining me in the podcast, and she's going to ask me the tough questions for which you want the answers. So please join me on Legal Deep Dives and listen to me call it like I see it. What's good, people? Welcome to the club room, here with my assistant Kayla, someone to keep me honest, keep me straight, someone to ask me the tough questions. How you doing today, Kayla?
I'm good. How are you?
Doing terrific. It's been a interesting couple of weeks for me.
Yeah, what's been going on?
Well, I've been trying to actually have some fun this summer for once. Normally I work all the time and I complain that, I live 5 minutes from the tennis courts and I never played tennis even though I love playing tennis. And so this summer I've been trying to take some time off, been playing some tennis, been going to the beach, which is great, but there's a price for that because that means I'm a little bit behind at work because that doesn't stop. And also I've been busy because I've been doing a lot of TV appearances lately.
Yeah.
Been doing covering cases for local news in South Carolina. Been doing a lot of court TV. And more recently, I've been doing a lot more Nancy Grace over the last few weeks.
Yeah, how are you liking that?
It's interesting. Me and Nancy go way back. My first experience with Nancy was when I actually tried my first big murder at the ripe old age of 30 years old. There was a case that got national attention. And it was a murder case I defended, and Court TV covered the case. Nancy Grace was doing commentary for Court TV, and they decided that they liked my courtroom persona, and that's when I developed a relationship with Court TV. But at that time, Court TV was this big thing where they had studios in New York, and I would get on the airplane and fly out to New York and, and go to their studio and give commentary in studio, and then they'd have me doing commentary remotely. They had offices in Charlotte, and I would do the remotes and out of Charlotte for them. And so, she and I go way back, and we've always had that kind of relationship where we can kind of go toe-to-toe, go head-to-head. The only downside to the recent appearances that, she has these panels. I'm not like one or two people. It's like 4 or 5 people on the panel. And her brand of broadcast is different. So, she'll ask me questions and I can give snippets and pieces, but I don't really get the opportunity to give a complete picture. So when I look at some of the shows, it appears that my opinions are biased, which they're not. But if you take these little individual pieces and put them in a vacuum, then it's going to look like I'm taking one position, which is completely the opposite and taken out of context. So that's the downside, particularly now that we're talking about the Nolan Wells case, which is, as you know, gotten a lot of attention. I've got a lot of opinions on that case.
Yeah, and let's clear some of it up. Tell us a little bit about what's going on and a little bit of the details.
Well, of course, as everyone knows, Nolan Wells is a black teenager. This case happens in Mississippi. He went on a boating trip for the 4th of July with some friends of his, and the friends came back without him, and ultimately they didn't know where. They told his parents they didn't know where he was. He wanted to stay behind, and they ultimately found his body washed up on the shore a couple of days later, up through the apparent cause of death being drowning.
And what are some of the suspicions surrounding the case? Is there anything, would you be able to elaborate on the racial component of it? What makes people think that this was racially motivated?
Well, and I definitely want to talk about that. And To put everything in context, like I say, I try my cases in the courtroom, not the newsroom. And I think that oftentimes people will have opinions that are based on little tiny snippets that may not be put in complete context. And so when I give my perspective on the details of this case, it's not just based on reading one article or watching one 20-second news, clip. Mm-hmm. It's really reading articles from multiple sources, reading interviews from multiple individuals, with direct firsthand knowledge of the case, and kind of putting everything together so you have context, not just one little piece of information, and running with it, because that's what can happen. But the reason this case has a racial component is because, a photo surfaced early on with Nolan Wells and three of his friends, all of which were white, on the boat. And of course, it's Mississippi, which has a documented, clear history of racial injustice and racial bias in law enforcement and in the community. Mm-hmm. So what happens is you have the narrative that this black teen went out with his three white friends, and they came back without him, and nobody's asking questions. And there's foul play, and they're somehow racially motivated because he was the only black with the three white kids, and and somehow the implication is he's a victim of racial-related foul play by the three white kids who came back without him. Why'd they come back without him? Why'd he go out there with these white kids by himself? And and then of course the next component is law enforcement is covering it up. There's a cover up because law enforcement's racist and they're trying to protect these three white teens who killed this black kid. Here we go again. And I want to be clear. It is understandable why people can feel that way, because historically we have seen that in our criminal justice system, that crimes involving black individuals, are often swept under the rug. They're deemed accidental, justified, no criminal conduct, or when so there's rarely arrest often, and when there's an arrest, what you always see is a not guilty verdict. Mm-hmm. And so that perspective is understandable. I want to be clear on that. However, to put everything in context, that individual photo, after listening to the interviews from three of his friends, was taken out of context. And the circumstances of what happened was taken out of context. And when I say that, according to, and I've seen three interviews, one of his white friends, one of his biracial friends, and one of a friend that was black. Mm-hmm. Okay, and when you listen to all the statements together, what they will tell you is that single photo generated a false narrative that he was the only black kid in the group. Okay, because that's the impression everybody has. Oh my God, he's the only black kid going out with all these white kids. No wonder. You see. Well, no. I mean, according to his other friends, one who was biracial said it was an ethnically diverse group. So he even said that photo put out a false narrative. Mm-hmm. And again, so we have one biracial friend talking. We have another black friend with the group talking who gave a statement. So the fact that, that's a false narrative that got put out there. Another thing to kind of, give what happened context is when you look at that photo, the narrative that comes out is, hey, he and these three friends were out on the boat by themselves, and he's the only one that didn't come back, and why'd they leave him? But when you listen to the statements, they weren't the only people going out to Horn Island. That's where they went. Horn Island is a very popular destination on 4th of July. I think a lot of towns that have, that are boating communities, it's a big boating community. So when it's holidays, 4th of July, Labor Day, people take the boats and they go out.
Yeah, it's just like Lake Murray.
Exactly. I'm sure you experienced that. And I want to stress, Kayla, as we talk about this, I'm giving you perspective from someone that's much older than 18, 19. You're certainly, although you're not 18, 19, you're closer to that age group. You have an active social life. You go out with friends all the time. You're very popular. You have a lot of friends. You don't have just 2 or 3. You got probably 15, 20, people that you go out with all the time on weekends, to the beach, weddings. You always have. So I want you to give me some context and your perspective as well when I describe what I think is reasonable. Now, according to the friends, though, this was a big, big thing where a lot of people went out that day. It wasn't just him and 3 people. In fact, according to his friends, there were a lot of them all who knew each other that were going out, loading boats up. There are multiple boats, and they're trying to figure out who's going to ride with who. Everyone doesn't own a boat. So people are trying to decide who they're going to ride with, whose boat, who they're going to ride with. They're packing things up. So when they got out there were multiple groups of friends that had different boats all going out to this big 4th of July event where there were at least hundreds of people out there, many of which who knew each other. So there's the narrative about, they should have been watching him while they leave him alone. I can sort of understand that. I mean, if you know 20, 30 people and you go out with 3 people, you don't need to babysit every one of your friends. Everybody's having a good time. Everybody's drinking. Everybody's talking to different people. And I think that puts some context into why that particular group did not have eyes on him. I mean, what do you think about that?
I definitely don't think it would be considered babysitting if somebody was with him, even though, like, if I go out to a bar with my friends and it's like, if I bring my best friend, I'm never leaving her alone. I don't care if she knows every single person in that bar. I'm not leaving her alone because you never know. I mean, obviously, with stuff like this, people are speculating that, oh, they're not really his friends. You never know what somebody's going to do. They could get drunk and become a completely different person. You just have no idea. So I would rather be there with her because I know I'm going to make sure she's going to get home safe. I'll walk her to her house. I'll Uber home. I'll stay the night there if I have to, drive home in the morning, make sure she gets safe. If I leave, something happens to her, I'm going to feel guilty about that. So I would never leave my friend alone at the bar. And I would expect somebody to do the same for me. If he was with 3 friends, one of them could have easily stayed behind, and it wouldn't even be considered babysitting. It would be more of just like a, hey, let me make sure that, we get home safe. I went with him. Let's leave with him kind of thing. I really don't think that it would be babysitting in that situation.
And this is why I disagree with you. And I think part of that disagreement is you're a female. Mm-hmm. And I think what you're saying in your perspective is smart for a female, whether you're 18 or 25 or 40, okay? But men are differently. I mean, men and males don't have that same fear of being kidnapped or roofied or isolated. That's just, men and teenage and boys and college age kids, males don't have that same concern. I think that's a very legitimate perspective for females. Mm-hmm. I think if it was a female, I would have a different perspective. From my perspective, and I'm much older than you are. But let's say, for example, I don't go to bars a whole lot. There's some guys that I play tennis with, okay? And there's 8, 9, 10, a dozen of us that play tennis together sometimes. I can see us all getting together to go someplace, a tennis event, and guys riding together, but I wouldn't expect the guys that I'm with to be the only people I'm talking to the entire time. I can see myself moving around with different groups, talking to different guys that I know, and I could see myself if the guys that I came with are rolling out and I'm doing something different and I know 10, 50, other people, I can see myself saying, hey, I'll catch a ride back with so-and-so because we live in the same neighborhood. I trust, and I can see legitimately the guys that I came with or went with having no real objection or problem with that because Mobley knows people. Mobley's a big boy. We all know these guys. We feel comfortable with him coming back with somebody else. So that's why I just have a little different perspective on that.
Well, I understand that example and I understand the explanation, but nobody is going to a tennis match and getting blatantly drunk. If you're going to a boat party, most likely, I mean, it's not always the case for me, but most likely somebody's going to get tore up. Someone is going to get way too drunk. It could happen to a guy, it could happen to a girl, it could happen to a parent that went, it doesn't matter. So if he's on the boat and he's getting drunk and his friends leave him alone, he could get absolutely wasted, black out, and have no idea what's going on. So that would be another concern because, that's the same thing. It happens to men too. And I know that most people don't think about that kind of thing, but it's just definitely something that needs to be considered. If you're all day drinking and you've been drinking all day, dehydration is a consideration. He could have passed out from that. It's just one of those things. It's a much more intense situation when people are getting blackout drunk.
I agree. And again, I'm not trying to argue with you. I'm just saying I think that
that's okay.
Your perspective is legitimate. Mm-hmm. And I think it's intelligent and mature and particularly important for females. But I don't think 18, 19-year-old boys think that way.
Probably not, but they should. All right. And so what are some red flags that you've seen in this? What raises some suspicion for you involving the case.
There are some red flags in this case, by the way. And I want to be clear at this point, the investigation is ongoing. I'm not expressing an opinion as to whether or not there's foul play. Like I say, I win my case in the courtroom, not the newsroom. But the red flags that I see are, and this is a problem in the case. And his parents have a legitimate concern that, when he came back, his friends said that he left his phone with them and allowed them to come back with his phone. That, to me, that dog doesn't hunt. I can understand leaving the phone in the boat because they're on the water. I mean, I get it. Your phone, you're getting in the water. You're not trying to have that phone. You don't need to do it. Hold it while you're in the water, swimming and hanging out in the water. So I can see leaving it in the dry bag with your keys. Same thing. I mean, if you're out in the boat in the water, you don't need to be carrying your keys around with you. Mm-hmm. You need your keys when you get back to wherever you guys met. But saying leave without me, but take my phone, take my keys. That's problematic for me because again, who is going to leave their phone? I mean, that is your only method of communication, and we all are just tied to our phones. And the whole thing with the keys is how you're going to drive your car back if So that's a major red flag to me as to that statement that he would knowingly and willingly do that. And the second red flag for me in this case is even assuming it's an accidental drowning. I have a difficult time understanding that he could drown in isolation. And when I say that, for anyone that understands being, at the beach or with water conditions, I mean, hey, you can be standing in the water and you could get a strong undercurrent. And yes, it could take you out unexpectedly. That can happen. A lot of people die that way, not understanding currents. I didn't understand that. My wife tells me that about when we go to the beach. And I don't understand how the current can just take you out if you're in the water. But I have a difficult time seeing that he's out there with all these people and nobody sees that. Nobody sees him get pulled under. Nobody sees him disappear and nobody calls for help or there's no real last person that saw him alive. That's a major red flag for me. Because I just don't see with all these people out there, when you know people and you're hanging out with people, that you would just drown in isolation. Like that. That's a major red flag for me. Those are the two things to me that would suggest there's a possibility or probability of criminal foul play.
Well, another thing I saw that I would like you to elaborate on too is the photos. There was nothing from his phone that day. They think it was wiped. Can you elaborate on that and talk about how maybe they could see if it was wiped and get those pictures if there were any, or how that would play within the case?
Well, this is, one of those things where a lot to unpack here. Number one, again, I'm not expressing at this time an opinion as to whether or not the photos are wiped or not. The parents believe that because they didn't see any photos. I mean, I can understand that being suspicious. However, I think that it's irresponsible to put out false narratives like that the phone may have been wiped. Okay? Because what's going to happen is people that are inclined to believe there was foul play are going to run with that. Oh, the phone was wiped. Well, if you can believe the phone may have been wiped, but there's a way to find that out. You get an expert. You get, and I do it in cases. Okay, I have experts that have the capability to download data from cell phones and analyze it. There's a lot of different software. I think one of the most reliable, well-known brands professionals use is something called Celebrite. And I've had it done for clients' phones. I've had it done for victims' phones, for people, when I represent people in criminal cases. I've had it done on phones of at-fault drivers in accidents. And when they do these downloads, they can tell. They can tell if texts have been deleted. They can recover those texts. They can tell if photos have been deleted, and they can recover those photos. They can tell if somebody was using certain apps at what time, and they can print out and analyze all of that data. And I can tell you, I mean, someone can download software that supposedly scrubs a phone, and they can tell somebody's done that. Okay, because I've had clients that I've actually had clients tell me one thing in a case, and I said, okay, well, do you have any texts? Oh, I think I deleted them. And I said, okay, I can get an expert to try to find them. My expert says, yeah, they're literally 2 different scrubbing software programs, applications that I put on the phone. So my client tried to wipe his phone twice. Okay.
Scrub the scrub.
Yeah, exactly. So that can be determined. So I think particularly, and I think particularly responsible when they have an attorney. Mm-hmm. Because, and they have, and everyone doesn't have the resource to pay for that. I mean, experts are going to charge you a couple of grand to do that, $1,500, $2,000, depending on how far you want to go back, how deep you want to go, what type of phone it is. But when they have an attorney representing them who can advise them, who has the capacity to have that done, I think it is irresponsible to get out there and say, we think his phone was wiped, when they know and they have that there's a method to determine whether or not that's true. Mm-hmm. And what I found surprising is they waited a long time, in my opinion, to try to have that done. And it doesn't take that long. Okay. As a matter of fact, what I think from what I read, they agreed to have their expert analyze the phone along with law enforcement's experts. And then I think they decided they would just let law enforcement expert do the data download. So now, again, if evidence indicates from the download that the photos were wiped or deleted that day, then yeah, But also, I think we got to keep in mind too. I mean, to delete photos, you kind of need the phone. You got to get that phone password. So they would still have needed his password.
Yeah, but I know most of my friends' passwords.
Okay, that's interesting. Okay. The only person who knows mine is my wife.
Only like my close friends.
Granted, I don't have any friends, so, So, but if I had them, they wouldn't know my password. So.
Good. Keep it locked down.
Okay. The production team has made me pump the brakes because, oddly enough, I'm going on and on and on way too long. So what we're going to do is go ahead and end for today. We're going to pick up where we left off in part 2 next time. See you next time.